most of the minds of most of us here, where the car's dashboard is showing you some metrics like the fuel reading, the fuel level, the engine temperature, the mileage, your speed, and all that. And we would all agree that these metrics seen here are very vital to your daily moving of a vehicle. You cannot sit uh, in a car ready to drive when you do not know how much fuel you have. Well, in our case, the taxi drivers and trotro drivers in our motherland have found a way to beat the manufacturers of cars. And even though their gauges don't work, they know how much fuel they have. But that's a peculiar case. But then usually, you need to know how much fuel you have. You need to know the speed at which you are going in case you are crossing the limits or something. And then you also need to know the mileage. For example, in purchasing and then the sale of a car, the mileage is one important factor. You also need something like your engine temperature, or you'll be at the risk of overheating. So these are some signals that the dashboard gives to the driver, to the user. And without them, havoc can be caused. And so why then do we need a dashboard? Right from the description of the car's dashboard, we know that it's to communicate. A message has to be sent across, whether it's about fuel, whether it's about your tire pressure, whether it's about one door being open, a seat belt not being worn. All of those things is all communication. And it is necessary in driving that vehicle. So even on the communication, we have some types where we have written communication that has to do with reports, proposals, emails, anything written. We also have visual communication that has to do with visual elements. So what your eyes can see and perceive. So you look at something and then you get feedback, and that's the communication. And then we have verbal communication, which has to do with the face-to-face convos or phone calls. I mean, speaking, yes. And then non-verbal communication, such as gestures, eye contact, your posture, and all that. These are ways that we can communicate. But then we'll find out that in a dashboard, the medium of communication, the method of communication we employ the most is visual communication. And we'll get to understand why visual communication is the preferred method. So visual communication, which is first of all defined as the use of visual elements to convey information. So elements such as pictures, charts, infographics, videos, and graphs are these elements that we are talking about. And the one reason why visual communication in some contexts is preferred is that it is easier and faster to digest, especially compared to written communication. What you need to read a whole page of text to understand, if it can be represented using one picture, it's easier and then it is faster. So that's one reason why visual communication is preferred in such a context. So based on that, visual communication is a way to get someone hooked onto your message. I might have to read 2 paragraphs and I may grasp some important factors, but then looking at one picture, I'm hooked. And that's how the brain is wired. But then even with such advantages of visual communication, it poses some cons, such that picking an ideal format is tricky. What this means is that in visual communication, you are at liberty to use the pictures and then all those elements we've spoken about to send a message. But then how do you know when you are going overboard? How do you know when the picture is describing exactly what you want to say? For example, if you put a book there and you meant to say maybe a diary, there are types of books. You meant to say a storybook, a diary, a Bible, whatever it may be. Is the book truly representing it? So what can you represent to show that this is, yes, it's a book, but what type of book? And so even though visual communication is easier and faster to digest, we are at the risk of miscommunicating. Yes. And so, and then one other reason why, especially in the context of a dashboard, is that visuals need to mutually support each other and represent a narrative, or else you tend to deviate. So, for example, back to the example of the car's dashboard. A car has so many metrics, so much information that as the owner of a car, as a driver, you need to know. For example, every bolt in the engine, every bolt and nut in the engine is vital. Losing one could pose a threat, but you cannot, but we don't find that on the dashboard because, for let's say you have the four there, or no, you even have, say the seat belt, the lights that shows that the seat belt is not being worn, and then you have your airbag, the airbag, something, that indicator to somewhere else. They don't connect. But then if I know that, for example, there's a flashing light that's showing that there's something wrong with one of my doors, and then there's right by that flashing light, I see that, oh, okay, the light that shows that some or all doors are open is on. Then I know that from this and this, I'm able to diagnose the problem. So they need to connect. And then we'll get to understand this more when we start building our dashboard. There are so many things that you might want to represent on a dashboard. There are so many things. Horsepower of the engine, all those things could be put there because they're important. But you can't, they don't find themselves there because they don't mutually support what's the other metrics there. They don't represent the narrative. And then they are not the most vital metrics at the time. And so knowing this, then how can we define a dashboard in the business context? According to Microsoft, a dashboard is a single page, often called a canvas. So a canvas that tells a story through visualizations. Note the single page that you need to tell a story through visualizations. And then dashboards are a way to monitor your business and see all your most important metrics at a glance. So a single page at a glance. We don't need multiple pages, else we can't. It will no longer be meet the glancing condition. And then because it's limited to one page, a well-designed dashboard contains only the highlights of that story. So this point is affirming the fact that we need the most important metrics to be presented on our dashboard. So these are examples of dashboards built with Excel with their sources. There are so many computer programs that you can use to build a dashboard. But what we are working with today is Excel. And so these are examples of dashboards built using Excel. The first one talking about movies, the top international movies of all time. So we see some graphics here. I think the logo here, we see a bar chart showing information about the directors. We see the movies specifically. We see a line chart showing the country's revenue. So USA, and then in that order. And then we see a donut chart here, which is really a nicer version of a pie chart, if I should call it that. And then we see another dashboard here, talking about global financial trends by country. So all what is telling us is that all what is found, all the visuals here are meeting this objective. That's global financial trends by country. You can see some other elements there that are not charts necessarily. You can see some icons of some social media platforms. And then we spoke about visual elements. So even though they are not charts, they fall under some visual element that can be used on a dashboard to communicate. Okay, then we'll go straight to what I term as the building blocks of a dashboard. Now, we've seen how dashboards look or are supposed to look, and we'll see more of that. But then, from what did you build a dashboard? You can't just build a dashboard out of nothing. So you need data. Without the data, you can't need the dashboard. You can't build a dashboard. And then from that data, whether it's the business data, data ranging from several different domains, whether it's in the manufacturing industry, it's an e-commerce site, it's a shop, small scale to large scale data of any form. And then from that data, you can build visuals. Now, visuals, for example, the icons that we saw on Facebook and Twitter and all that, you don't need the data to be, you can just obtain them from the web. But then I'm talking about visuals such as the bar charts, the column charts, the line charts, all those other visuals that you need data to be able to produce them. So from data, you're able to build your visuals, and then a combination of the visuals will result in your dashboard. Now, really, this particular slide is supposed to come after come during the guidelines when we are talking about the guiding principles in building a dashboard. But these two, I believe, are very important, and we need to know even before we get to the hands-on session and then we start building. Because without these two, you wouldn't be building something that it may be called a dashboard, but it doesn't meet the particular purpose. So the first thing we need to note is that a dashboard cannot house all information about a subject. A dashboard, from the definition we've seen, it's a one page. It's a one page. Okay, I'm reading something in the chat. Okay, so you're allowed to ask questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Yes, you can at any point. You can. We'll have a session for questions and answers at the end of the presentation, but and that's recommended. But if you can't wait, then you are free to, you can feel free to raise your hand or ask in the chat box. And then someone is saying we should record. Please, we'll do that. It's being recorded. Thank you. Okay, so going on, one very important thing we have to note is that a dashboard cannot house all information about a subject. For example, in the car situation, you can't have everything about the car on the dashboard. I think someone is mistakenly controlling my system. So if the person could kindly check that for me. Okay, it's back. And because a dashboard cannot house all information about the subject, you need to set your objectives without having a goal, without having some specific objectives outlined. There's so many things you can do. There's so many visuals you can come up with, and you wouldn't know what to place on the dashboard. You wouldn't know what meets the objective. You wouldn't know how to filter out which visual should be here, which visual should be here, and it can get really overwhelming. So setting objectives is the first thing you should do even before building a dashboard. And then on the audience, with a given data set, any given data set, different dashboard may be prepared based on the recipient. What this means is that with one data set, let's say we have data talking about sales. We are an e-commerce company. So we are talking about sales in the country Ghana from, or let's say Africa. So in the continent Africa. This same data set, we can have about 3 dashboards resulting from it, or even more. And this is based on the recipient. Let's say I mentioned that it's a continental industry company. So let's say we are presenting to, you are the one building the dashboard, you are presenting to the continent to region director. He might want to see metrics showing the global performance across the region. The performance of the company across the region. So in Ghana, in Togo, Nigeria, how the company is doing, how sales are going. But then if you have to present to, say, the director for Ghana, and he needs to work on some things pertaining to Ghana, it's not really going to help him when you give him metrics globally, and it doesn't really drill down to the country Ghana. It's the same. If you are presented to Nigeria, you cannot really send Ghana. You might want to make some comparisons, but then it all depends on the audience and then the objectives. And so the audience matters. So we are going to have a hands-on session. We'll come back to this, but we'll have our hands-on session. But before that, let me just talk about the data we are going to be using this afternoon. So it's about video game sales from Kego. And then the data set contains a list of some video game sales along with some descriptive information. And there are a total of over 16,000 rows and then 10 columns. So the fields or the columns are, you have the name, so the name of the game, the platform of the game's release. So PC, we'll see examples, PC, PS4. And then the year of the game's release, the genre, whether it's action or adventure or any other genre. We have publisher of the game. We have NA sales, which means North America, sales in North America in millions. We have EU, so that's Europe. We have Japan. We have sales in other parts of the world. And then we have global sales. So I can share this data set for those who would want to follow along. You probably have your PC by you and you want to follow along. Let me share that in the chat box. Just a second. Okay, please give me just a minute. I'm sharing it. Okay, I believe it's not just from my end, but then it has actually been received. Okay, so I see a reaction, so that means it's been received. Thank you. So let me go on, reopen. Share my. Okay, so we are back. Now, even though I've sent the file and you might want to follow along, I would highly recommend that you not get too distracted such that you miss some steps. It's advisable to follow along and then be doing as we do together. But it's more important to understand what's done. So you can, if you are not able to, for those who don't have their PCs around or who would want to try an alternative, you can document everything that's done. Even though this will be recorded and shared, you can document everything that is done. So when it's time to reproduce and you have the data set, you can just reproduce other than getting lost. Okay. So straight into building the dashboard. This is the data we've been talking about. Name. So the name of the game, we see some games here. Wii Sports, Super Mario. We see the platform on which the game was released. We see the year the game was released. We see the platform, the publisher, and then their respective sales, and then global sales, representing the sales in the 4 regions. That's North America, Europe, Japan, and then other parts of the world. And so every every game here is unique. There's no game is repeated. We see some platforms being repeated because one platform can release multiple games. The same for the other fields, really. So platform, year, genre, publisher have this. You can see the same values repeating in some instances because it's possible that they'll release one game, but then won't have the same game. So the first thing to do when you have this is now called the data as you see it is called a range. It's just a data range. It's not a table. It's not tabulated. Yes, even though we know a table is rows and columns, in this particular case, Excel doesn't recognize it as a table. And one best practice is to convert it to a table. It'll help you in several analysis. You can filter, you can sort and all that. And so it's best to convert it to a table. And how to convert it to a table is you can just click anywhere within that range and do a Control A. You can go to the Insert tab and then you see table here. Now there's an option for my table has headers. If yes, because our table has headers, we see name, platform, and all that. So it should be checked. In the case where you don't have that, then you just uncheck this. Another alternative to converting this to a table is you can just click anywhere in that range and do a Control T. That's the same thing. For those, I don't know if you can see, but there's this moving line around our range. That's the same thing. My table has said this. You just see, okay. So now we have a table. And clicking the drop down by, say, platform, for example. Please, once again. Okay, I'm going to go over that again, how to convert it to a table. So this is a range as we see it. You can click anywhere in your range. So right now I'm at Tetris, and then you can just do a Control T. And that's all it takes. You just have to make sure that you check this box if you have headers. So name is the header. Name is not a name of a game. Name is the header. Platform, or running through to global sales are all headers. So we need to check it. In the case where you don't, you just uncheck it and then do OK. Or you can just Control A, or even the same process. You just click one side, you go to Insert, and then Table. In the Tables group, under the Insert tab, you find the table option here. You just select table. It's the same thing. Table. So now we have a table. And then one advantage of having a table is its functionality. For example, let's say the genre. We want to click on the drop down for genre. You can see that even though we have over 16,000 rows, it's just these about 13 or so genres. So if you want to just see the action games, you can just deselect, uncheck the select all box, just select action, and then you have it. So these are this is one of the advantages of having a table. Okay. And then it's always best, Excel automatically names your table. In this case, let me just click anywhere outside. When we click on the table, we see this tab pop up, which is the table design ribbon, an auxiliary tab, the table design ribbon, where we have table name in the properties group, table name. It's Excel automatically gave it this name, but then you want everything to be descriptive enough. Even though you are the one doing the work, you may have to refer back to something at a point and you didn't name it, and so you don't know what to call it. You don't know whether it's table 1, table 2, table 3, and all that. So we'll name it let's say video, let's call it video games. So video underscore games, enter. Now we have a named table. And then I talked about having clear set objectives. And so in our case, let's assume we are looking at sales from a global perspective. So our dashboard is supposed to go to someone who view things from a global perspective. From a global perspective. So we'll say one thing we want to look about is the total sales by genre. So based on the different genres, how do our sales look like? And then we can also look at, say, the total sales by region. So we can see four regions here. We see North America, Europe, we see Japan, and then other parts of the world. So we are saying these are 4 regions, and they want to know how sales have been doing across these regions. We can also look at something like maybe the top 10 best-selling games. So which games brought us the most sales? Did we make the most sales out of? We can also talk about maybe you want to look at some metrics along across time, so across the years. So you want to look at the number of games that have been released across the years. We can also look at something like the sales across the years. So having clear objectives like this helps you in building your dashboard. Now, for example, the first one, that is the sales, global sales by genre. So global sales by genre. You can decide to use basic Excel formulas, maybe some if the genre is sports. So maybe you want to find the amount for all sports related games. So you can say some if then you want to calculate for global sales. Then you can say you need sports to be in there. You can do this, but really Excel provides an efficient, a better way of doing this, so that you have to be doing all this formula work. And that's what's called a pivot table. So a pivot table is a table of values, which are aggregations or summary statistics. So whether it's the count or the sum or the average, the max of groups of individual values from a more extensive table. So what I'm saying is that we are going to get what we call a pivot table, and it's going to come out of this table. And what that table does is it groups whatever field you define. So if you want to group the genre, so we have all sports, all platform, all racing, and then it will give us maybe the sum of sales in any, the sum of all that. So let's practicalize that. In creating a pivot table, we already have a table. We've made this and converted this from a range to a table. So all we need to do is you can click anywhere in the table, and then you go to insert ribbon. The first thing under pivot table, you see the pivot table here. From table range, external data. What we are working with is the table range. And then we see our table is named. So we see video, we named it video games. So we have video games here. Do you want it in a new worksheet or an existing worksheet? I want it in a new worksheet. If you want existing, you just choose existing. You go to the worksheet you want to work with. But I'm working with a new worksheet. And then this is what we get. Your sheet and everything should be descriptive enough. So I'm going to name this sheet pivot tables. Yes. And then say we want to look at total sales by genre. So total sales really is we will need to sum all this because it's already done in a field known as global sales. So we can drag global sales to values. And then we want to look at it based on the different groups of genre. So we can drag genre to rows. So in this case, our rows will contain the particular genre, and then the other column will contain the sum of the global sales. That's because the default is sum. The default metric to use is sum. You can change this if you want the average. You can easily change this by using the value field settings. Maybe you want a sum, a count, average, and all that. You can change it, but the default is sum. Let me attend to some chats. Okay, that's attended to. Okay. And so this is easy. What we would have used several minutes using basic formulas, the sum if and all that to get the pivot table just presented in this format. And then this format, we see ideally we would have wanted to see something like genre at the top here, where row labels is seen. Then we'll see all the genres listed. But then we see row labels. So you can easily change that by going to the let me hide this by going to the design ribbon. Under the report layout, you can just choose show in tabular form, and then you have what you are looking for. So that's pretty much about a pivot table. Now, why would you need to build a pivot table? Because we need to summarize something based on genres. And then out of this pivot table, you can easily build a chart. So let me just build one as an example. You can go to the pivot analyze. When you click on the pivot table, you can go to the pivot analyze tab. You just choose pivot chart. and then it gives a recommended one. So let's say column, there's bar, there's so many you can use. In this case, let's say I want a bar, and I'll explain why I want a bar. I want a bar because these names are long. The names of the genres are long, and a column chart, I'm sure you saw it, how it looked like. A column chart slants the name, and I don't want that. So a bar presents a better format, in my opinion. And then the bars is it's hard to track whether strategy is higher than puzzle and whether it's higher than adventure. So the best thing is to sort these values. And what you can do is just by selecting the pivot table, home, you go to sort and filter, and then whether smallest to largest or largest to smallest. So I'll do, okay, smallest to largest gives us this. So now we know the action is leading in terms of global sales. Action games leads, and then strategy games lag. So that's what this is about. Now, it's best practice to make sure that you might end up drawing and producing various pivot tables as well as various charts. One thing is to, just like we did, naming our sheet, naming our table, is to name your pivot table. And you just go to the pivot analyze tab, and then you name it. So let's name this, say, global sales. Okay, so just global, because that's the only global in our document, in our data. So global by genre. And then you can do the same for the chart. And it's going to help you in case you want to refer back to something. Okay. Now you can see that I have this side by side because I don't want to end up going somewhere. So now I'm going to look for my chart and then I'm trying to trace it back. So it's in your best interest to make sure that you organize everything and it doesn't, the work that you've produced doesn't turn back at you to haunt you. Okay. So we have this, and then we said we'll also look at the count of the total sales by region. We'll get to that one because that's quite tricky based on the data sets we have. So we'll get to that one. We can also look at the number of games across the years. So in 2020 something, how many games were released? So we go back to our data, the same process. Insert pivot table. This time it's not a new worksheet. We've already created a worksheet. So I'll go to existing location. Okay, so I click on my pivot tables sheet and I maybe put it somewhere down here and then okay. And then now I said I wanted the number of games released over the years. So I know I need years, not as values, but as rows. Because I don't want the sum of years or the count of years. I need every year and its corresponding metric. And then you can count, in this case, you can count name. Remember I mentioned that the name is a unique value here in this data set. So you need to know your data set. So what name really is doing is counting the games that have the corresponding year assigned to them. So 9 games were released in 1980. 46 games were released in 1981. But I don't want to be seeing, personally, I don't want to be seeing count of name. Maybe today I understand what it means, but I may not understand it later. So I just double click and then the custom name, I'll do its count of games instead. And then the same format where you go to the reports layout in a tabular format. And then I want to visualize this. So I'll go to pivot chart. We all know that when something has to do with time, the best thing to use is a line chart. So I'll go to line. Then let's see, I want the one with markers. Okay. And then I just select it. And then there I have it. not forgetting, I need to name everything. So I go to pivot chart, analyze, and I'll name this say games by years. So it's really up to you to make sure that how you're naming it is descriptive enough to you. And then the pivot table will also be games by. Okay. And then we want to now visualize. We now know the count of the games that we released. Now we want the sales that we made from these games, still based on the year. You can either decide to go back to the data set and insert, do the whole process again, or you can just copy an existing pivot table, Control C, you just go to where you want to put it, just Control V, and then this won't alter what you have here because you copied, you didn't cut, and then you just change this to the rows now to years, and then it's now sales. And so now you have sum of global sales by year. We are going to plot. It's based on time. So we are going to use the line chart. And then there we have it. Never forget to name. So we have global. The other one, we named the global by genre. So we'll do this one global by years. And if you skip this step of naming, we'll get to a point where you realize that you really needed to do this. And then this will be global. This pivot table global by years. Okay. So there we have it. Now we have 3 pivot tables, 3 visuals, and all of these metrics are telling us something from a global perspective. So what can we see from this? Let's making it a little bit bigger. You can see that sales were gradually increasing. It wasn't doing much between 1983 and 1990. And then it picked up. It kept increasing, dropped a little bit, increase, drop, increase. And then there was a serious drop down till 2020. That's what our data is telling us. You will not be able to see this if you sort it by year, you can see the numbers already. We know 9 is lower than 46, which is higher than, but then you can't visualize it. So this makes everything easy. So remember we said visuals are easier to digest, easier and faster to digest. Okay, so we are still looking at things from a global perspective. We want our next metric, which will be, we have the count of games by year. We have the global sales by year. We have, now let's look at the top 10, say top 10 best-selling games. So the games, let me set a new pivot table. Existing worksheet, pivot table, scroll down there. And then, okay. So we want the top 10 best-selling games based on the global sales. So again, global sales would be my value. And then this time it will be name, because remember it's a name column, the name field that houses the respective games individually. It's not grouped. And so name will come to rows. Now note that this gives us over 16,000 rows, which is really hard to work with. But then you can easily filter. You want the top 10. So in the drop down right here, you just click it, and then you want to filter based on value. Label will be filtering based on the name of the game. Value will be this value. So we want based on values. And then, okay, so we have an option here, top 10. We say top 10 items by sum of global sales. There are some pivot tables where you have more than one value column. So maybe you have sum of global sales, you have sum of sales in North America, sum of sales in other regions, and you want to sort based on, say, North America. Then you can toggle to the one and select the one you want. But in this case, you have just one. So we'll do OK. And then it gives us the top 10. So the highest. And then we'll plot let's plot a bar chart. Okay. And then remember we sort to help visualizing. So we go to home and then we'll do say smallest to largest. Okay. So straight away, we didn't know this even though we had the data sets, but straight away we know that Wii Sports leads and then followed by Grand Theft up to Call of Duty. And these are the top 10 that are doing well globally. So we have four visuals. We are going to be making probably five visuals today. So let's work on our last visual. Let me check if there are any questions. Um, okay. So someone wants me to go through the sorting once again. Okay, okay. So I'm going to go through the sorting. For the sorting, all you need to do is just select anywhere within that range. You can decide to select the whole thing, but then you can just select any aspects within that range. And then you just go to sort and filter. And then whether largest to smallest or smallest to largest. In the sort and filter is found in the editing group in the home ribbon. Okay. I hope that's clear now. Please, are there any people who are following along at their end?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and please, how is it going?
I'm a bit lost at the moment, sir, but I'll just go through the video, sir.
Okay, but where exactly are you lost at?
Oh, I'm a little bit behind. A little bit behind, sir.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So Pamela is asking me to go over how I got the top 10. Okay, so Pamela, I'll do that. Please, are there any others following along at their end?
yeah, I'm following.
Okay, okay, and please, how is it going?
Yeah, it's right where you are.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. Please, the rest you can comment in the chat box. So Pamela, about the filtering, you can just come to this drop down by the name. So the drop down right here. And then you are filtering based on values. If you are filtering based on labels, then that would mean that you are filtering based on the name of the game, the label. But in this case, we are filtering based on values. So just values, you just hover over it, it gives you these options. And then we wanted top 10. So we just do top 10. And it gives us this. This formula, I hope that was clear. Yeah. Yes, the link to the recording, the link to the WhatsApp group, we'll also try our best um to send the documents you are working with. So you have the dashboard and everything, so you can practice at your end. So don't be disturbed if you are lost. But then feel free to raise your hand or drop a comment at any section, just like others are doing. So we all move along together. Okay. So we have how many visuals do we have? We have four. Okay. One thing we are going to look about is the count of games. Right now, we know some stuff about the global sales, but we don't know the number of games released in the various regions. It will be nice to know if maybe 50% of our games are being sent to North America or Japan and all that. So with the nature of this data set, no, even before that, to have something like that, looking at the pivot tables that we've already drawn, we'll need something like, let me just do this manually. We want the regions, right? So maybe the region will be somewhere here, region. Then it's about years. This is a different count. This counts of games by region. And then we know we have four regions. So we have NA, we have EU, Europe, we have Japan, we have ADA. Okay. So we need the corresponding games. But with the nature of this data set, these NA, EU, JP, and all that will have to be values for us to just use a pivot table for this, simply for this. What I mean is, for the years, we saw that we were able to get year, and then please, I want everyone to catch this point. So feel free to ask any question if you get confused. So we can see that we have year, and then we have its corresponding value. We have here,
Mm-hmm.
year all over here, and then we have their corresponding value. When we go back to the data set, we see that year is a column, and then all the years that we see here as rows are also values in this data set. They are represented by value. 2006 is not a column, it's a value. 2008 is not a column, it's a value. Up to 2020, I think the data set extends to 2020. So all these are values, and every game has its corresponding year. So the pivot table is able to group that simply for us. But then let's look at the sales. The sales are now not values, but they are columns. So NA has its own column.
Mm-hmm.
EU has its own column. JP has its own column. Other sales in that order. So what we can do in this case, let me demonstrate something, show you how it will look if we try to use the normal. So pivot table, I'll go to existing worksheet. That's pivot tables. And then somewhere down here, I'll say, okay. Now I want the count of games by region. Remember, I need name as my value because that's what house the distinct games. And now I need JP, EU, and NA, and then other. Am I going to drag them to my rules? It's not going to help because look at what you're going to get. You're going to get every value represented in the NA column. If I do that for EU, it even extends longer, which is not what we want. So what you can do is to just have NA, EU, JP. So these are the four regions we want to work with. So, sorry, what we can do is we have a pivot table. Where is the pivot table showing the count of games by year? Just a second. Okay. Please give me just a minute. Okay. Did I say count or sales? Sorry about that. I wanted sales by region, not count. Sales. Sales. Yes, sales by region, not count of games. Sorry about that. Okay. So the same principle. We have NA. We can put global here, but how we get the rows? So what you can do in this case is to put what you are looking for as your value. So NA, EU, JP, other sales. These are the four regions you are working with. And then you can now just manually, you have a table here. You can manually reference the cell that contains your total that you're looking for. So this represents the sum of sales made in North America. This represents the sum of sales made in Europe, for Japan, and then other parts of the world. This is what your pivot table looks like. But plotting a pivot chart, a chart from this is not going to reflect what you want to reflect because you want the region and then the corresponding sum of sales. So what you can do is just manually reference the cell. So I'll say equal to NA. This is the value for NA. And then I'll just enter. For EU, I can do the same thing. Enter. Same for JP. Enter. And then same for other. And now I have it. I can just convert this to a table. my table has headers, yes. And then I'll name it and I'll say sales by region. Let me check if there's a question. Please, do we get the concept of that? Even though the pivot table presents an automatic way of doing things, an efficient way, there may be cases where you might have to manually do some stuff. And this is an example. So I hope that was clear. So now we have the region and then the corresponding sales. So I can just plot a chart from this and I'll go to, in this case, it's not a pivot table, it's a normal table. So I'll just go to insert, the insert ribbon. And then I want a pie chart. Okay, I want a pie chart. So I just select and go to all charts, pie, and then okay. So now I have what I want. We'll do the editing of all that later on. But now I have the five metrics, the five charts that help us answer the objectives we outlined. And that is to look at sales from a global perspective. Okay. So now let's go on to building a dashboard. I'll create a new sheet and I'll name it dashboard. Okay, I see a chart. What if you have more than 4 regions? Are we to type it manually? Okay, a very good question. Ishmael Nati, a very good question from you. Thank you. If you have more than 4 regions and the number is beyond, I'm assuming you mean the number is beyond what you can type. There are more advanced ways that you can employ. You can use some stacking and unstacking methods to get what you're looking for, so that you don't have to manually do it. But in this case, it was just 4, so you're able to do it simply. So that's a more advanced method, which is beyond the scope of today's session. But then that's a very, very, very good question from you, Ishmael Onati. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to create a dashboard. Now, remember I talked about organizing your elements, naming everything. That's your tables, pivot tables, charts, your sheet, and all that. Now I'm going to show you an example of how I organized my pivot tables. So you might have to do a more extensive, don't be overwhelmed by this. It's just what we've done. It's not, don't let it be plain in your eyes. This is you might have to do more extensive analysis anytime you have a data set. And so to make things simple for me, I analyze based on the 5 fields, that genre, year, publisher, platform, and then maybe the name of the game. So regarding everything that has to do with the genre, that is the number of games per genre, the sales to North America, sales to Europe, Japan, other parts of the world, and globally, I just have all my pivot tables outlined at the top here. So anytime I need to do something related to genre, and they're all named, I can just come here. Anytime I need something relating to year, the same thing. So yearly analysis based on platform, analysis based on publisher, and then any other analysis. So you find out that this is going to help you in the long run. So as you work and then you go along doing your analysis, you will find the way that works best for you. What you're going to do is how we did it in the classroom. Did I say classroom? How we did it in what we just did. Whether you do it pivot table, charts right by side, or pivot tables and then charts on a different sheet. In my case, I had the corresponding chart on the next sheet. So I know where to find everything. And this is what works best for me. So you find what works best for you. And then, okay, so I have to make these pivot tables and charts. So it's descriptive enough. Let me check if there are some questions. Which data should go to rows or columns? Please, you mean in the pivot table? I'm assuming you mean in the pivot table. So I'm going to answer based on that understanding. If I'm wrong, kindly correct me, Gaskia. Okay. So, okay, yes, please, on the pivot. Okay. So taking this pivot table, for example, I I could have decided to put genre on columns and it won't change anything. What is still going to give me my aggregations based on the individual genres. But then I don't want to see I don't want to see something long like this. And that's why I'll prefer it to be rows for space and all that. So you can't work this way. There's nothing wrong with working this way. But then the key is that whatever you're expecting as your values will be in the values field. Whatever you're grouping to get your summary statistics will be in either columns and genre. And then there are advanced methods that you can even apply. You can use filters. In this particular session, we won't be using filters on our pivot tables directly. Okay. So now let's go on to building a dashboard. Now, one thing you can do in building a dashboard, we've seen examples of dashboards, is the first thing to do is to envision how you want your dashboard to look. Right now, we know we have um, five visuals we are representing on a dashboard. You can envision how you want your dashboard to look. You can decide to do a wireframe. What a wireframe simply means is you just do a skeleton sketch, a draft of how you want it to look. So maybe you want all this section to cover your header. So you can just do keyboard shortcut Control Shift 7, which just places the border on where you select. So I don't know if you can see it, but then there's a border here. So me, I want a border to be here. And now say it will talk about my header, so maybe video game sales analysis. And then maybe I want something here to talk about my um global sales. So how much did I make overall as a figure? You can put it here. You can have something else here and all that. So you can decide to go through this step and envision how you want your dashboard to look. So in my case, I would want say here to be my header, what's selected. So I'll merge and center, and then I'll type video game sales analysis. Okay. And I want it to be bigger than this. So you just select that cell, increase the font size. Uh, you can center it. I don't like this font. So let's say I choose this font. You can decide to change the colors. Let's say I want the text. No, I want the text to be white on a blue-gray background. And there you have your header, as simple as that. And maybe I want some cards to be, maybe I want about 6 cards. So one card will show me sales made globally. Another one will show me the total number of games. Another one will show me maybe the sales, yes, the sum of sales in the other 4 regions. So that's NA, EU, JP, and then the other parts of the world. So what you can employ the use of shapes in building such cards. So I'll go to shapes, and then let's say I want the rounded rectangle. And you just manually draw it. And then for NA, okay, let me go to let the first thing be global sales. So globally, the grand total should give me my global sales. Okay, so sum of global sales per genre is all this. And then globally, this is what I have. So 8820.36 is what I have. So you can just manually type it. As you can add the dollar sign and say 8820.06. There are more advanced ways to do this, but then this is one basic way to get the job done. You can just center it here, and then you have your card. You can, let me just, you can add a text box, or you can just type and say, this is representing total global sales. And then there we have it. I'll just duplicate it using the keyboard shortcuts, Control D, and then I'll spread them across. So let's say I want one here, I want one here, I want one here, I want one here. Now my second one should not tell me the same global sales thing. It should tell me the number of games in total. And that will be a little over 16,000. So that's 16,327. So this rather 36. Okay. So I'll say I have 16,327 games. Then I have to change the header to. So maybe I'll say the count of games. Then lest I forget, the analysis is for games released between from 1980 to 2020. So that can be part of my header. So everything is descriptive enough. And then let's see now I want NA sales. So total North America. So I'll just do NA sales. And I'm presenting to someone who already knows the company. Now assuming I'm presenting to someone who already knows what this means. In a case where the person doesn't know what NA means, it's not a smart thing to be putting NA, EU, and all that. So all of these factors have to be considered in producing a dashboard. And then I'll do one for EU, EU, EU. I'll do one for Japan, which was JP. And then I need another one for, what is the last one? For other. And then I'll just change the values. So referencing this place, we have, okay, 433 and all. So let me just copy these ones there. For NA, we had 433.43. And then for EU, we had 2402.12 dollars. Remember, it's in millions of dollars, so you can add the MMM by the side. And then I have 1284.3. And then other parts of the world was 789.1. Now I don't have to imagine having to arrange this to get it aligned and all that. That's a lot of work, which is even seemingly impossible. What you can do is to just select all, control, you hold on control your keyboard, and then you just click on the other ones. And then you go to shape format, align, and then you align the top. So you want all to be in line. And then how about the spacing in between? The same place where you just do distribute horizontally. So the spacing is now even. And then, so that's that. And I want to bring my visuals. So let's say the first thing I want to represent is the sales by region. So let me name this before and the net total sales by region. Okay. And then I can just copy this. Control V, it's here. I didn't copy this. Okay. Okay. I want it to be somewhere here. I want the data labels to be shown, but I want it in percentage. I want to know, I don't want to know the exact amount because the cards already tell me that. I want, say, percentage. So I'll go to just more options, choose percentage and uncheck value. And then I want it outside. So there's a label position outside end. So playing around all these things, you're able to find out these things and get what works best in the context. Okay, so I think that's fine. And then I want, say, my next chart that's genre, maybe something by genre. Total sales. Okay. And I'll just copy it here and I'll say total, rename it. Total sales by genre. And then you can just hide. I don't want to be seeing this sum of global sales and genre here, so I can just hide it. Right click, hide all field buttons. Then that's that. Can decide to uncheck the legend. The total here doesn't help me. So there's a plus sign, plus button here. Uncheck legend. Then maybe grid lines. And I want the data labels to show. And I want to uncheck the say primary horizontal so that the figures don't show here. Okay. And I'll bring my other charts here. So I want this, and then I want the last one, which is the sales, the top 10 best-selling games. Okay. So we are pretty much done with our dashboard. The rest is to be aligning the stuff based on how you want it to look. Okay. Then there are two at the bottom. Okay, so there's one here. I want it to be under this. I want the next one to be under this. And I want this to be under this. Now you can apply several formatting techniques to make it look good. You can change the size and all that format using the format tab that pops up. You can do all of that. The same aligning works for it. You need to get a good dashboard. And then you can even insert what's called a slicer. That's the last thing we are going to talk about today. What's called a slicer. So a slicer presents a way to have an interactive dashboard such that so let me go to the pivot table. And then I go to the first pivot table we produce. That's the genre, the sum of sales by genre. And then I go to insert, I go to pivot table analyze, and then I do insert slicer. What this slicer is really a filter. So maybe I want to see the sum of sales, global sales by genre in a particular year. So I can just check year and then okay. I want this to be on my dashboard, not here. So I'll just Control C or Control X and then I paste it here. So look at what happens to this chart when I change it. So in the year 1984, shooter was doing well. And then 1987, fighting, in that order. You can connect this to all other charts by selecting the slicer. You go to slicer, the tab that pops up, and then report connections. Now, this is where I talk about naming everything. You see, these last two tables were not named, so I don't know what they mean. And then the rest are named, and they can help me to connect them. So you just need to check it and connect. Now, when you click on the year, it will not only affect the one, but any other connection. So you can see that this pie chart is now moving. So that's about building a dashboard. This is a basic standard dashboard that you can build based on the objectives you set. In a case where you're setting for any, you would have to do something different. You have to approach it from a different perspective. So I'm going to show a dashboard that I designed to show you what a dashboard can look like. So I'm going to just you can uncheck headings. I've already unchecked it. You uncheck the headings. These are the headings. You can check the grid lines. You can check the formula bar. So you just see the dashboard. This is in the view ribbon. And then I can just click here. So I just see this. And this is what I have as my dashboard. This is telling me total sales by region, where I can be doing everything by year. And at a glance, I'm able to have a global perspective of how sales have been doing between the years 1980 and 2020. So that is about a dashboard. Now, there may be time for questions, but before that, I'd like to hand over to Frank to come in, or Nana to come in and brief us on some aspects of our program. So please, Frank or Nana, over to you. Let me check who's over. Okay, while